The morning sun cast long shadows across the military recruitment center as Sarah Chen walked through the glass doors, her heart pounding with determination and fear. At 19, she stood barely 5 feet 2 inches tall, her slight frame almost lost in the oversized jacket her father had insisted she wear. The building buzzed with activity as dozens of young men filled out paperwork, their voices creating a steady hum of excitement and nervous energy. Sarah approached the reception desk where a stern-faced sergeant looked up from his computer screen. His eyes swept over her small frame with obvious skepticism before he even spoke a word. "Lost, miss?" he asked, his tone suggesting she had wandered into the wrong building entirely. "No, sir. I'm here to enlist," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. The sergeant's eyebrows shot up, and he glanced around as if looking for hidden cameras. "Enlist? You sure you're not looking for the recruiting office down the street? They handle administrative positions." "I want to be infantry," Sarah said clearly, watching as the man's expression shifted from confusion to barely concealed amusement. "Infantry?" He leaned back in his chair, making no effort to hide his skepticism. "Sweetheart, infantry means carrying a rifle, not filing paperwork. You might want to reconsider something more suitable." The word stung, but Sarah had prepared for this moment. She had spent months researching, training, and building up the courage to walk through these doors. Her father, a Vietnam veteran who had lost his legs in combat, had tried to discourage her. Her mother had pleaded with her to consider college instead. But something deep inside Sarah called her to serve, to prove that strength came in many forms. "I understand what infantry means, sir. I've been preparing for this for over a year." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder containing her high school transcripts, letters of recommendation, and physical fitness test results from her local gym. The sergeant barely glanced at the documents. "Look, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but let's be realistic here. Combat roles require physical strength that..." He gestured vaguely at her frame. "Maybe you should consider something in communications or medical support." Behind her, Sarah heard the unmistakable sound of snickers from some of the male recruits who had been listening to the conversation. The heat rose in her cheeks, but she refused to back down. "I'd like to speak with a recruitment officer about infantry positions," she said firmly. The sergeant sighed heavily, as if dealing with a particularly stubborn child. "Fine. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez will be with you shortly. Take a seat over there and fill out these forms." He handed her a clipboard with standard enlistment paperwork, his expression making it clear he considered this a waste of everyone's time. Sarah found an empty chair in the corner of the waiting area, acutely aware of the stares and whispered comments from the other recruits. "Check out G.I. Jane over there," one of them muttered, causing a ripple of quiet laughter. "Someone should tell her this isn't summer camp," another added. Sarah kept her eyes on the paperwork, carefully filling out each section with precise handwriting. She had dreamed of this moment for so long that she refused to let their mockery derail her plans. Her pen moved steadily across the pages as she provided information about her education, her reasons for enlisting, and her desired military occupation specialty. 30 minutes later, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from an office and called her name. He was a compact man in his mid-30s with kind eyes that contrasted sharply with the reception sergeant's dismissive attitude. As they walked toward his office, Sarah caught fragments of conversation from the waiting area. "This should be entertaining," someone said. "I give her 5 minutes before she changes her mind," came another voice. Rodriguez's office was small and functional, decorated with military awards and photographs from various deployments. He gestured for Sarah to take a seat across from his desk before settling into his own chair and reviewing her paperwork. "So, Miss Chen, I see here you're interested in infantry. Can you tell me why?" His tone was professional but not dismissive, which Sarah found encouraging. "My father served in Vietnam, sir. He always told me that service was about more than personal benefit. It was about protecting something bigger than yourself." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I know I don't look like the typical infantry soldier, but I've been training hard. I can meet the physical requirements." Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "I can see from your fitness test results that you've been working at this. Your scores are actually quite impressive." He flipped through her documentation. "But, I have to ask, have you considered other military occupational specialties? There are many ways to serve that might be better suited to your strengths." The familiar frustration bubbled up in Sarah's chest. With respect, sir, I understand that people have assumptions about what I can and cannot do based on my appearance. But I believe those assumptions are wrong. It's not just about assumptions, Rodriguez explained gently. Infantry work is physically demanding in ways that go beyond standard fitness tests. Carrying heavy equipment over long distances, functioning on minimal sleep, operating in harsh conditions. These aren't judgments about your character or determination, just practical considerations. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. I've been carrying 40-pound packs on 10-mile hikes every weekend for the past 6 months. I've been doing functional fitness training with a veteran who specializes in military preparation. I've studied tactics and field manuals on my own time. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke. I'm not here on a whim or because I think it sounds exciting. I'm here because I know this is what I'm meant to do. Rodriguez studied her face for a long moment, and Sarah could see him wrestling with competing thoughts. Finally, he pulled out a different set of forms from his desk drawer. All right, Miss Chen. If you're serious about this path, we'll need to proceed with the full evaluation process. This includes extended physical fitness testing, psychological evaluation, and extensive background checks. He handed her the forms. But I want you to understand that even if you meet all the initial requirements, the final decision about infantry placement isn't mine to make. Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. I understand, sir. What do I need to do? Report here tomorrow at 0600 hours for preliminary physical testing. Wear workout clothes and bring water. The testing will take most of the day. He looked at her seriously. I'll be honest with you, Miss Chen. In 15 years of recruiting, I've never had a female candidate seriously pursue infantry with your level of preparation. Most people assume it's not possible. Maybe they haven't met the right person yet, Sarah replied. Rodriguez almost smiled at that. Maybe not. We'll find out tomorrow. As Sarah left his office with her paperwork, she walked back through the waiting area where many of the same recruits were still seated. The conversations died down as she passed, and she could feel their eyes following her movements. Well, the reception sergeant asked as she approached his desk. I'll be back tomorrow for physical testing, Sarah informed him. He shook his head in apparent disbelief. If you say so, miss. Outside the recruitment center, Sarah sat in her car for several minutes, processing the morning's events. The skepticism and mockery had been expected, but experiencing it firsthand still stung. She pulled out her phone and called her father. Dad? I did it. I started the enlistment process. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sarah, sweetheart, are you sure about this? It's not too late to reconsider. I'm sure, Dad. I know you're worried, but this feels right. Her father sighed, a sound weighted with years of experience and concern for his daughter. Your mother is going to have my head for not talking you out of this. Mom will understand eventually. You both taught me to stand up for what I believe in. That evening, Sarah spent hours preparing for the next day's testing. She laid out her workout clothes, checked her gear, and reviewed her training notes. Her bedroom walls were covered with military history books, tactical manuals, and printouts of physical fitness requirements. Her desk held notebooks filled with her own handwriting documenting everything she had learned about military life and combat operations. Her younger brother knocked on her door around 10 o'clock. At 16, Jake looked up to his sister despite not understanding her military aspirations. Mom's been crying downstairs, he said quietly. Sarah felt a pang of guilt but pushed it aside. She'll understand someday. This isn't about rejecting the life she wants for me. It's about following the life I need for myself. But why infantry? Why not something safer? It was a question Sarah had asked herself countless times. The honest answer was complicated and deeply personal. Part of it came from growing up with her father's stories of brotherhood and sacrifice in Vietnam. Part of it came from a need to prove that strength and courage weren't defined by physical size or gender. But the deepest part came from something she struggled to articulate, even to herself. Because I think we all have a purpose, she said finally. And I believe mine involves protecting people who can't protect themselves. Jake nodded, though she could see he didn't fully understand. Just promise me you'll be careful.
I promise I'll be smart about everything I do." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the recruitment center 30 minutes early.
The building was quieter at 6 in the morning, with only a handful of staff members and 2 other recruits present. Rodriguez appeared at exactly 0600 hours, wearing military physical training gear.
"Ready, Miss Chen?"
"Yes, sir."
"Good. Follow me."
He led her to a gymnasium attached to the main building where several stations had been set up for various physical tests. Sarah recognized most of them from her independent research: push-ups, sit-ups, distance running, obstacle courses, and equipment carries.
"This isn't the standard fitness test," Rodriguez explained. "This is an assessment to see if you can handle the physical demands specific to infantry training."
The standards are higher than general military requirements.
Over the next 4 hours, Sarah pushed her body to its limits.
She completed every exercise, met every benchmark, and refused to quit despite the burning in her muscles and the exhaustion that set in halfway through.
Rodriguez observed silently, taking notes and occasionally calling out time markers.
During the equipment carry exercise, where recruits had to transport heavy gear across various terrains, Sarah struggled more than she had hoped. The weight was significant, and her smaller frame made the task more challenging than it would be for larger recruits. But she completed it within the required time, her determination overriding her physical limitations. "Impressive," Rodriguez said as she finished the final exercise. "Your times aren't the fastest I've recorded, but they all meet or exceed the minimum standards." Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and pride.
"What happens next?" "Next, we move to the psychological evaluation and interviews. But first, there's someone who wants to meet you."
Rodriguez led her back through the main building toward an office she hadn't noticed before. The nameplate on the door read Colonel James Mitchell, Station Commander.
"Sir?"
Sarah asked, suddenly, nervous about meeting such a senior officer. "Colonel Mitchell heard about your case and requested a meeting. Don't worry, it's not unusual for station commanders to meet with unique candidates." Rodriguez knocked on the door and waited for permission to enter. The office beyond was larger and more formally decorated than Rodriguez's, with American and military flags flanking a substantial desk. Behind the desk sat a distinguished man in his 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once.
"Miss Chen," Colonel Mitchell said, rising from his chair. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez tells me you're interested in infantry service."
"Yes, sir."
"And I understand you've completed the preliminary physical requirements."
"Yes, sir." Mitchell gestured for her to take a seat, which she did carefully, very aware that this conversation could determine her future. "In my 28 years of service, I've learned that the military's greatest strength comes from people who bring something unexpected to the table," Mitchell began. "Sometimes that's technical expertise, sometimes it's leadership ability, and sometimes it's simply the refusal to accept limitations that others try to impose."
Sarah listened intently, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I've reviewed your file, including your test results from this morning.
Your performance indicates that you can meet the physical standards required for infantry training."
Mitchell leaned back in his chair. "But I need to ask you a direct question, Miss Chen. Why is this so important to you?"
The question hung in the air, and Sarah realized this was a defining moment. She could give a safe, conventional answer about patriotism and service, or she could tell the truth about the deeper motivations that drove her. "Sir, I believe that courage isn't about being the biggest or strongest person in the room. It's about being willing to stand up when it matters, regardless of what others think you can or cannot do." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "My father came home from Vietnam missing his legs but not his pride. He taught me that service means something beyond personal achievement. I want to be infantry because I believe I can make a difference there, and because I refuse to let other people's assumptions define what I'm capable of accomplishing."
Mitchell nodded slowly. "That's the kind of answer I was hoping to hear."
He opened a folder on his desk and withdrew several documents.
"Miss Chen, if you're truly committed to this path, I'm prepared to approve your infantry application. But I want you to understand what you're signing up for."
Sarah's heart leaped with excitement, but Mitchell's serious tone kept her grounded. Infantry training is designed to push people to their breaking point and beyond. The instructors will not go easy on you because you're female or because you're smaller than your classmates. In fact, they may push you harder to prove you don't belong there.
His eyes met hers directly. "Are you prepared for that level of challenge?" "Yes, sir. I am."
Furthermore, if you complete infantry training and receive your assignment, you'll be entering units where you may be the only female soldier. You'll face skepticism, resistance, and possibly hostility from some of your colleagues. Mitchell's expression remained serious.
"Can you handle that while still performing your duties effectively?" "I've been handling skepticism and resistance since I walked in here yesterday, sir.
I'm prepared to prove myself through my actions."
Mitchell smiled for the first time during their conversation. "In that case, welcome to the infantry candidate program, Miss Chen."
3 months later, Private Sarah Chen stood in formation at Fort Benning, Georgia, surrounded by 67 other infantry trainees. The Georgia heat pressed down on them like a suffocating blanket as Drill Sergeant Thompson paced back and forth, his voice cutting through the humid air like a blade. "Today we begin weapons familiarization," Thompson announced, his eyes scanning the rows of recruits. "Each of you will be assigned a service rifle that will become your primary tool for the duration of training." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment she had been working toward for months. The intensive training had been everything Colonel Mitchell had promised and more. She had endured countless hours of physical conditioning, tactical instruction, and mental challenges designed to weed out unsuitable candidates. Several recruits had already dropped out or been reassigned to other military occupational specialties. The training had been brutal, but Sarah had persevered. She learned to navigate obstacle courses under time pressure, master hand-to-hand combat techniques against larger opponents, and think strategically under stress. Her classmates had gradually moved from open mockery to grudging respect as she consistently met every standard placed before her. "When your name is called, step forward and receive your weapon," Thompson continued. "This rifle will be your responsibility, your tool, and, potentially, your lifeline. Treat it with the respect it deserves." One by one, recruits stepped forward to receive standard M4 carbines. Sarah watched the process, mentally rehearsing the weapons handling procedures she had studied extensively. Her turn was approaching, and she felt the familiar mixture of nervousness and determination that had accompanied every milestone in her military journey. "Chen, Sarah." She stepped forward crisply, her boots clicking on the concrete as she approached the weapon station where several drill sergeants stood behind tables loaded with rifles and equipment. "Request permission to approach for weapon assignment, Drill Sergeant," she called out in the sharp, clear voice that had become second nature during training. "Granted. Step forward." Sarah moved to the table where Drill Sergeant Morrison, a tall man with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness, waited with a clipboard in his hands. Behind him, several other instructors observed the process. "Private Chen," Morrison said, consulting his list. "You've shown exceptional aptitude in tactical training and weapons theory." "Thank you, Drill Sergeant." Morrison picked up a standard M4 carbine and began to hand it to her, but then hesitated. He glanced over at the other instructors, particularly focusing on a figure Sarah hadn't noticed before. Standing slightly apart from the group was an older man in dress uniform, his chest decorated with ribbons and awards that indicated extensive combat experience. The man was tall and distinguished, with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Sarah had never seen him before, but something about his bearing suggested he held significant authority. Morrison caught the man's eye and received a subtle nod in response. "Actually, Private Chen," Morrison said, setting the M4 back on the table. "There's been a change." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Had she done something wrong? Was she about to be removed from the program just as she was receiving her weapon? Morrison reached under the table and withdrew a different rifle, one Sarah didn't recognize immediately. It was clearly military issue, but sleeker and more compact than the standard M4. The metal had a different finish, and the overall design suggested precision engineering beyond standard infantry weapons. "This is your assigned weapon," Morrison said, holding the rifle out to her. Sarah accepted the weapon carefully, immediately noting its perfect balance and the quality of its construction. The rifle felt different in her hands, more precise and sophisticated than any training weapon she had handled. "Drill Sergeant, what type of rifle is this?" she asked, following protocol by requesting information about her equipment. Morrison glanced again at the distinguished man in dress uniform, who stepped forward for the first time. "That, Private Chen, is a specialized weapon system," the man said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command. "It's not standard infantry issue." Sarah looked more closely at the rifle, noting markings and features she didn't recognize from her training materials. The weapon was clearly designed for precision work, with advanced optics mounts and modifications that suggested specialized applications.
Sir, I don't understand. Why am I receiving non-standard equipment?
The man studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable.
What's your assessment of that weapon, Private?
Sarah examined the rifle more carefully, applying the technical knowledge she had acquired during training. Sir, based on the weight distribution, barrel length, and modification points, this appears to be designed for precision shooting rather than general infantry applications. The materials and finish suggest it's built for sustained accuracy under demanding conditions.
Correct. And what would that suggest about its intended use? Sarah felt a chill of understanding.
Sir, this would be appropriate for reconnaissance or specialized operations rather than standard infantry work.
The man nodded approvingly. Very good, Private Chen. You have an eye for equipment assessment.
But, sir, I enlisted for infantry.
I don't understand why I'm receiving specialized equipment.
Because, Private Chen, sometimes the military identifies potential that the individual doesn't recognize in themselves. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice so that only Sarah and the nearby instructors could hear.
Your performance during training has been exceptional.
Your aptitude tests show abilities that would be wasted in standard infantry assignments. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and concern. Sir, with respect, I want to serve where I'm needed, but I specifically requested infantry service. And you'll complete infantry training, the man assured her.
But you'll also receive additional specialized instruction. Consider this weapon a preview of expanded opportunities.
At that moment, one of the other recruits, a large young man named Peterson who had been among Sarah's most vocal critics, spoke up from the formation.
Drill Sergeant, why does Chen get special equipment? Are we lowering standards now?
The comment was technically a breach of protocol, but several other recruits murmured agreement, suggesting they shared Peterson's sentiment. Sarah felt the familiar heat of embarrassment and anger, but before she could respond, the distinguished man turned to address the formation. That's an excellent question, recruit, he said, his voice carrying easily across the group.
Perhaps this is a good time for a demonstration.
He walked back to the weapons table and selected a standard M4, checking it quickly before addressing the group.
Private Chen, you'll use your assigned weapon.
Private Peterson, step forward and receive a standard rifle. Peterson looked uncertain but complied, accepting an M4 from Morrison.
Range safety protocols are in effect, the man announced.
Private Chen and Private Peterson will each engage targets at 200 meters. 5 rounds, standing position, iron sights only. Sarah felt her pulse increase, but not from nervousness. The weapon in her hands felt natural, and she had spent countless hours practicing marksmanship during training. The challenge wasn't the shooting, it was performing under pressure while her classmates watched. The group moved to the firing line, where targets had been set up at various distances. Sarah and Peterson took position side by side, with the entire formation watching from behind the safety line. Private Peterson, you'll fire first, the distinguished man instructed. Peterson raised his rifle and took his time acquiring the target. His first shot was slightly off-center, but within the acceptable zone. His second and third shots were better, and his final 2 rounds grouped reasonably well.
When he finished, his target showed respectable accuracy for a trainee at that distance. Acceptable performance, Private Peterson. Private Chen, you're up.
Sarah raised her rifle, feeling the weight and balance as she acquired her sight picture. The weapon was remarkably smooth, with a trigger that broke cleanly and sights that aligned perfectly. Her first shot hit dead center, and the subsequent rounds clustered tightly around the bull's eye. When she finished, the range fell silent except for the sound of wind across the Georgia landscape.
Outstanding marksmanship, Private Chen, the man said. But that's only part of what I wanted to demonstrate.
He walked over to examine both targets, then returned to address the formation. Private Peterson fired an acceptable group with standard equipment. Private Chen achieved superior accuracy with her assigned weapon.
But here's what I want you to understand.
His eyes swept across the assembled recruits.
Private Chen isn't receiving special treatment because standards have been lowered. She's receiving specialized equipment because her abilities merit specialized training.
Peterson looked confused and slightly embarrassed. Sir, I don't understand the difference. The difference, Private Peterson, is that Private Chen has demonstrated aptitude that qualifies her for advanced training opportunities. Her physical training scores, tactical comprehension, and technical aptitude have all exceeded standard requirements.
The man's voice remained calm but authoritative.
The military succeeds when we identify and develop individual strengths, not when we force everyone into identical roles. Sarah felt a surge of pride but also renewed determination to prove herself worthy of the confidence being placed in her. Furthermore, the man continued, Private Chen's specialized training will ultimately benefit everyone in her unit.
The skills she develops will enhance overall mission capabilities. He turned back to Sarah. Private Chen, what's your assessment of the weapon you just fired?
Sir, the rifle performed flawlessly. The trigger is crisp, the balance is excellent, and the accuracy potential clearly exceeds standard infantry weapons. Sarah paused, then added, but, sir, I still don't understand why I'm receiving this level of specialized attention. The man almost smiled at her persistence. Because, Private Chen, exceptional soldiers deserve exceptional opportunities. Your job now is to prove you can handle both. As the formation began to disperse for the next training exercise, Peterson approached Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read.
Chen, I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I assumed you were getting special treatment because you're female. I was wrong. Sarah nodded, appreciating his honesty. No hard feelings, Peterson. We're all here to become better soldiers.
That shooting was impressive.
Where did you learn to shoot like that?
My father took me hunting when I was young, and I've been practicing at civilian ranges since I decided to enlist. Sarah adjusted her rifle sling.
But, this weapon is in a completely different class from anything I'd used before. Well, whatever they have planned for you, you've earned it.
After Peterson walked away, Sarah found herself alone with her thoughts and her mysterious new rifle. The weapon was clearly expensive and sophisticated, suggesting that someone with significant authority had taken an interest in her training. That evening, after regular training concluded, Sarah was called to report to the company commander's office. The building was quiet, with most trainees attending to equipment maintenance or personal time. She knocked on the office door and waited for permission to enter. Inside, she found not only Captain Williams, her company commander, but also the distinguished man from the firing range demonstration. Private Chen, please take a seat, Captain Williams said.
I'd like you to meet General Robert Morrison.
Sarah's eyes widened as she realized she had been speaking with a general officer all day without knowing his rank. She started to stand and salute, but General Morrison gestured for her to remain seated.
At ease, Private Chen. This is an informal meeting.
General Morrison took a seat across from her, his expression serious but not unfriendly. I suppose you're wondering why a general officer is taking an interest in an infantry trainee, he began.
Yes, sir. It's unusual, to say the least. Private Chen, are you familiar with special operations selection programs?
Sarah felt her pulse quicken.
Yes, sir. I've read about them, but I understood they weren't typically open to female soldiers. That's been historically accurate, Morrison admitted. But policies and needs evolve.
We're currently evaluating candidates for a specialized program that requires specific aptitudes and characteristics.
What kind of program, sir? Morrison leaned forward slightly.
Before I answer that, I need to know if you're interested in opportunities beyond standard infantry service.
Sarah considered the question carefully.
Her original goal had been infantry service, but the events of the day suggested possibilities she had never considered. Sir, I'm interested in serving wherever I can make the greatest contribution.
If that means specialized training, then, yes, I'm interested. Morrison nodded approvingly. Good answer. The program I'm referring to is classified, so I can't provide detailed information at this stage.
What I can tell you is that it involves advanced training in reconnaissance, precision operations, and specialized tactics.
And the rifle I was assigned today? Is a preview of the equipment standards you would work with in this program? Morrison stood and walked to the window. Private Chen, your performance during infantry training has been exceptional.
More importantly, your psychological evaluations suggest you have the mental resilience and adaptability required for advanced operations. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension.
Sir, what would this mean for my infantry training?
You would complete infantry training as planned, then move directly into the specialized program if selected.
Morrison returned to his seat. But, I want to be clear about something, Private Chen.
This opportunity exists because of your abilities, not because you're female.
Gender is irrelevant to operational effectiveness. I understand, sir. Do you? Because you'll face skepticism and challenges that have nothing to do with your actual capabilities.
Some people will assume you're there because of political correctness rather than merit. Sarah thought about her experiences at the recruitment center and during training. Sir, I've been dealing with skepticism since I enlisted. I understand that I'll need to prove myself through performance, not words. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then made a decision.
Very well, Private Chen.
Complete your infantry training, and we'll discuss your future assignment. He stood, indicating the meeting was over. Continue to perform at your current level, and you'll find that doors open to opportunities you never imagined. As Sarah left the office, her mind raced with possibilities and questions. The rifle slung across her shoulder felt different now, not just because of its advanced design, but because of what it represented. She was being offered a chance to serve at a level she had never dared to hope for. Walking back to the barracks, she encountered several of her fellow trainees preparing equipment for the next day's exercises. "Hey Chen," called out Rodriguez, a recruit from Texas who had become a friend during training.
"What was all that about today with the special rifle?" Sarah considered how much she could or should share. "Just some additional training opportunities."
"Must be pretty significant if a general officer is personally involved."
"It might be. I'll know more after I complete infantry training." Rodriguez nodded. "Well, whatever it is, you've earned it.
Your shooting today was incredible."
"Thanks. I'm just trying to be the best soldier I can be. We all are. But some of us have more natural talent than others."
That night, as Sarah cleaned and maintained her specialized rifle, she reflected on the unexpected turn her military career had taken. When she first walked into the recruitment center, her goal had been simple: prove that she could serve effectively as an infantry soldier despite the skepticism of others. Now she found herself being considered for opportunities she didn't fully understand, carrying equipment that suggested advanced operations beyond standard infantry work. The challenges ahead would be greater than anything she had imagined, but so would the potential to serve at the highest levels of military capability. She thought about her father, still believing she was going through standard infantry training. Eventually, she would need to explain that her military career was taking an unexpected direction, though she wasn't sure how much she would be allowed to reveal. The rifle lay across her lap, its sophisticated design a tangible reminder that her journey was just beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself worthy of the confidence being placed in her abilities. Outside the barracks, she could hear the sounds of other trainees preparing for sleep, unaware that one of their classmates was being evaluated for a level of service none of them had imagined possible. Sarah completed her equipment maintenance and prepared for bed, knowing that the weeks ahead would determine whether she was truly ready for the specialized role being offered to her. The rifle that had caused such a stir that day was just the beginning of a transformation that would test every aspect of her character and capabilities. As she drifted off to sleep, Sarah's last conscious thought was a promise to herself: whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them with the same determination that had brought her this far. The mockery and skepticism she had faced were nothing compared to what she might encounter in specialized operations, but they had also taught her that other people's assumptions were not limitations on her own potential. The weapon resting beside her bunk represented possibilities she had never dared to dream of, and she was determined to prove herself worthy of every opportunity being offered. 6 months after graduating from infantry training, Sergeant Sarah Chen found herself in a place she had never imagined possible. The classified training facility, known only as the farm to its occupants, was hidden deep in the Virginia mountains, far from public view and conventional military installations. The specialized program General Morrison had mentioned had indeed materialized into reality. After completing infantry training at the top of her class, Sarah had been quietly transferred to what she learned was officially designated as the Special Activities Training Center. The program's existence was classified, its mission was compartmentalized, and its trainees were selected from across all military branches based on criteria that went far beyond standard qualifications. Sarah's days now began before dawn with physical training that made infantry preparation look like recreational exercise. The specialized rifle she had received at Fort Benning was now one of several weapons systems she was learning to master with precision that bordered on artistry. Her training cadre consisted of instructors whose backgrounds were classified but whose expertise was undeniable. They taught advanced marksmanship, close-quarters combat, tactical medicine, communications, and a dozen other specialized skills that conventional infantry soldiers never encountered.
The other trainees in her program were equally exceptional.
There were Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Force reconnaissance operators, and Air Force Special Operations personnel. Sarah was not only the sole female in the program but also the only trainee who had come directly from conventional infantry rather than existing special operations units. This morning was different, however. After 12 weeks of intensive training, the trainees were being evaluated for final selection into operational units. Sarah had excelled in every phase of training, but she knew that performance in controlled conditions was only part of the assessment process. "All right, people, gather around," called out Chief Master Sergeant Blake, the senior instructor whose quiet intensity commanded immediate respect from everyone in the program. "Today begins your final evaluation exercise." The 12 remaining trainees formed a circle around Blake in the briefing room. Sarah noted that their group had started with 18 candidates, but attrition had claimed several trainees who couldn't handle the physical and mental demands of the program. "This exercise will last 72 hours and we'll test everything you've learned here," Blake continued. "You'll be operating in small teams in realistic conditions with live opposition forces who are under orders to treat this as actual combat." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Live opposition forces meant that the exercise would be conducted with actual risk, not the controlled conditions of previous training scenarios.
"Team assignments are as follows," Blake announced, consulting his clipboard. "Team Alpha, Rodriguez, Patterson, and Williams. Team Bravo, Johnson, Martinez, and Chen." Sarah glanced at her assigned teammates. Staff Sergeant Marcus Johnson was a former Marine Force reconnaissance operator with extensive combat experience. Sergeant First Class David Martinez was an Army Ranger who had served multiple deployments in Afghanistan.
Both men had initially been skeptical of having a female teammate but had come to respect her abilities during training. Each team will receive a mission package that includes objectives, intelligence briefings, and equipment loadouts, Blake explained. Success will be measured not only on mission completion but on how you handle unexpected complications and work together under stress. After receiving their mission packages, Team Bravo moved to a secure briefing room to review their assignment. Sarah opened the sealed envelope and spread the contents across the table. "Looks like we're tasked with reconnaissance and target elimination," Johnson said, studying the mission documents. "Intelligence suggests enemy forces are operating from a compound approximately 20 kilometers from our insertion point." Martinez examined the provided maps and satellite imagery. "Terrain is challenging. Heavily forested with limited visibility. Perfect for an ambush if we're not careful." Sarah analyzed the enemy force estimates and defensive positions. "According to this intelligence, they have 12 to 15 personnel with automatic weapons and possibly explosives. Standard tactics would suggest a coordinated assault, but our mission specifically calls for stealth and precision." "Agreed," Johnson said. "This is more about surgical strikes than overwhelming force." They spent the next hour planning their approach, studying terrain features, and selecting equipment. Sarah's specialized rifle was supplemented with night vision equipment, communications gear, and enough supplies for 3 days of independent operation. As they prepared to depart for the exercise area, Chief Blake approached their team. "One additional consideration," he said quietly. "Your opposition forces for this exercise include former Special Operations personnel who are being paid substantial bonuses for successfully detecting and engaging trainee teams." Sarah understood the implication immediately. Their opponents would be highly skilled, motivated, and experienced in exactly the type of operations Team Bravo was attempting to conduct. "Any questions?" Blake asked. "Rules of engagement?" Martinez inquired. "Lethal force is authorized if you believe your life is in immediate danger. Otherwise, use training ammunition and simulated explosives. But be aware that your opponents are using similar equipment, so getting killed in this exercise means real consequences for your final evaluation." The team loaded into a helicopter for insertion into the exercise area. As they flew over the Virginia wilderness, Sarah reviewed their plan one final time. Their approach would be methodical and patient, emphasizing reconnaissance and precision rather than speed. The helicopter dropped them at a landing zone 5 kilometers from their target, and they immediately moved into the forest to begin their approach. The terrain was exactly as challenging as the maps had suggested, with dense vegetation and uneven ground that made silent movement extremely difficult.
Johnson took point, with Sarah in the middle and Martinez covering their rear approach.
They moved slowly, pausing frequently to listen for signs of enemy activity.
After 2 hours of careful movement, they reached an observation position overlooking their target compound. The intelligence had been accurate.
Through her scope, Sarah could see a fortified position with multiple buildings and several personnel moving between defensive positions.
The enemy force appeared to be well organized and professionally equipped. "Count 12 visible personnel," she whispered into her radio. "Multiple automatic weapons positions and what appears to be explosive devices at key access points." "Confirmed," Martinez replied. "This is going to require precise timing and coordination." Johnson studied the compound through his binoculars.
"I see a potential approach route along the eastern ridgeline. We could establish overwatch positions and engage selected targets to create confusion." "That works if we can maintain communication and coordinate our fire," Sarah agreed. "But we need to be prepared for their response.
These guys aren't training dummies."
They spent the remainder of daylight conducting detailed reconnaissance, identifying key targets and planning their assault for just before dawn when visibility would favor their night vision equipment. As darkness fell, the team moved into position. Sarah established herself on a rocky outcrop that provided clear lines of sight to the compound while Johnson and Martinez positioned themselves to cover alternate approach routes.
"Team Bravo in position," Sarah whispered into her radio. "Targets identified and marked." "Copy that."
"Initiate on my signal," Johnson responded. At exactly 0530 hours, Johnson gave the signal and Team Bravo began their assault. Sarah's first shot eliminated a sentry in a watchtower, while Johnson and Martinez simultaneously engaged targets at the compound's main entrance. The response was immediate and professional. The opposition forces took cover and began returning fire with a level of tactical sophistication that confirmed Blake's warning about their experience and motivation.
"They're moving to flank our position," Martinez reported. "We need to relocate immediately."
Sarah gathered her equipment and moved to an alternate firing position, maintaining visual contact with the compound while avoiding the enemy's attempts to locate her position. For the next hour, Team Bravo conducted a running battle through the forest, using their training in small unit tactics to maintain pressure on the enemy while avoiding direct confrontation with superior numbers.
Sarah's specialized rifle proved invaluable during the engagement.
Its accuracy and reliability allowed her to provide precision fire that disrupted enemy movements and protected her teammates when they were forced to relocate under pressure.
"This is more intense than I expected," Martinez commented during a brief pause in the fighting. "These opposition forces are good," Sarah agreed.
"They're using real special operations tactics against us." Johnson's voice came over the radio with new information.
"I've got movement to our north. Looks like they're trying to surround us."
Sarah quickly moved to a position where she could observe the northern approach. Through her scope, she could see 3 enemy personnel moving through the forest with the skill and equipment of professional soldiers. "Contact north," she whispered, settling into a stable firing position. Her first shot took down the lead man, causing the others to dive for cover and begin searching for her location. Sarah immediately relocated, knowing that remaining in one position too long against skilled opponents was a fatal mistake. The battle continued for several more hours, with Team Bravo gradually eliminating enemy resistance through careful movement and precise fire. Sarah's training in advanced marksmanship proved decisive in several engagements where her ability to hit targets at extended range gave her team tactical advantages.
As the sun reached its zenith, the opposition forces made a final coordinated assault on Team Bravo's position.
Sarah found herself separated from Johnson and Martinez, forced to operate independently against multiple enemy personnel who were attempting to flank her teammates. Through her scope, she could see Johnson pinned down behind a fallen log, with enemy forces approaching from 2 directions.
Martinez was engaged in close-range fighting and unable to provide support.
Sarah made a tactical decision that would define her evaluation. Instead of remaining in her concealed position, she moved closer to the enemy forces, accepting increased personal risk to provide effective support for her teammates. Her movement brought her within 50 meters of enemy positions, close enough that her shots were lethal accurate but also close enough that return fire posed a significant threat to her safety.
Johnson, Martinez, stay down.
I'm engaging from close range, she transmitted.
Chen, that's too dangerous.
Maintain your position, Johnson replied.
Negative. You need immediate support.
Sarah began engaging enemy targets with rapid, precise fire that eliminated 3 opponents in quick succession. Her position was immediately compromised, but her intervention allowed Johnson and Martinez to break contact and move to better defensive positions. Enemy fire focused on Sarah's location, forcing her to use every bit of cover available while continuing to provide suppressive fire. Her specialized rifle's reliability under stress proved its worth as she maintained accurate fire despite the intense pressure.
Chen, can you reach the extraction point? Martinez called over the radio.
Working on it, Sarah replied, moving through the forest under fire while the remaining enemy forces attempted to track her movement. The exercise concluded when Team Bravo successfully reached their designated extraction point with all objectives completed and no team members killed during the engagement. As they waited for helicopter pickup, the 3 teammates reviewed their performance.
That was some of the best shooting under pressure I've ever seen, Johnson told Sarah.
Your decision to move in close when we were pinned down probably saved both our lives.
Martinez nodded agreement.
I've worked with a lot of special operations personnel, and you performed at their level today. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction but also understood that the evaluation was far from over. Their instructors would analyze every aspect of their performance before making final selection decisions.
Chief Blake met them at the landing zone as their helicopter arrived. How did it go? He asked. Mission accomplished, Johnson reported.
All primary objectives completed with no team casualties. Blake nodded but offered no immediate assessment of their performance. Report for debrief at 1,400 hours. Individual evaluations will follow. As they flew back to the training facility, Sarah reflected on the intensity of the exercise. The opposition forces had indeed been former special operations personnel who fought with skill and determination that exceeded anything she had encountered during conventional training. Her specialized rifle had performed flawlessly throughout the engagement, and her own abilities had been tested under the most realistic conditions possible without actual combat deployment. That afternoon, Sarah reported for her individual evaluation interview. The review board consisted of Chief Blake, General Morrison, and 2 other senior officers whose names and backgrounds were not provided.
Sergeant Chen, please take a seat, General Morrison said. We need to discuss your performance during the exercise. Sarah sat at attention, unsure whether the interview would result in selection for operational assignment or dismissal from the program.
Your technical performance was exemplary, General Morrison continued.
Your marksmanship, tactical movement, and equipment handling all exceeded program standards.
Thank you, sir. However, we need to discuss your decision to leave a concealed position and move closer to enemy forces during the final engagement. Sarah had expected this question and had prepared her response carefully. Sir, my tactical assessment was that my teammates faced immediate threat that required intervention. Maintaining my position would have provided personal safety but would not have supported mission success. That decision placed you at significant personal risk, one of the other officers observed.
Yes, sir.
But it also provided the support necessary for mission completion. General Morrison leaned forward slightly. Sergeant Chen, in special operations, individual survival and mission success must be balanced carefully. Heroic actions that result in operator casualties can compromise entire missions.
I understand, sir.
My assessment was that the risk was acceptable given the tactical situation. Blake spoke for the first time during the interview. Sergeant Chen, your teammates reported that your intervention was decisive in their survival and mission completion.
How do you weigh individual risk against team success?
Sarah considered the question carefully. Sir, I believe that team success requires individual team members to accept appropriate risk when necessary. My training and equipment gave me unique capabilities to influence the situation, and I believe using those capabilities was the correct decision. General Morrison exchanged glances with the other officers before speaking again. Sergeant Chen, effective special operations personnel must demonstrate not only technical competence but also sound tactical judgment under pressure.
Yes, sir.
Your performance during this exercise, and throughout the entire program, has demonstrated both qualities at an exceptional level. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she realized the direction of the conversation.
Congratulations, Sergeant Chun. You have successfully completed selection for operational assignment. The words hit Sarah like a physical force. After months of training and evaluation, she had achieved selection for a level of military service she had never imagined possible when she first walked into the recruitment center over a year ago. Thank you, sir. What happens next? General Morrison smiled slightly. Next, Sergeant Chen, you learn about your operational assignment and the specialized unit you'll be joining. He reached into a folder and withdrew a document with classification markings that indicated its sensitive nature. You'll be assigned to a unit that officially doesn't exist, conducting operations that officially never happen, with equipment that officially was never developed. Sarah understood the implication. She was being assigned to a classified special operations unit whose very existence was compartmentalized information. Your specialized training and demonstrated abilities have qualified you for assignment to a unit designated Black Talon, General Morrison continued. The unit's mission includes precision operations in support of national security objectives. The name Black Talon sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She had heard rumors of specialized units with names like that, but had never imagined she might be selected for such an assignment. Sir, what does this mean for my future service? It means, Sergeant Chen, that your real training is just beginning. 2 years after her assignment to Black Talon, Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen had become someone even she wouldn't have recognized from her early days at the recruitment center. The specialized unit had transformed her from an exceptional trainee into an operational asset whose skills were utilized in missions that shaped global security from the shadows. Black Talon operated from a facility that officially didn't exist, conducting operations that were never acknowledged, and achieved objectives that were never discussed in public forums. Sarah had participated in 18 classified missions across 4 continents, each one requiring the specialized skills she had developed during her intensive training. This morning, however, she found herself in an unexpected situation. General Morrison had requested her presence at a military conference where senior officials from multiple agencies were discussing emerging security challenges. Her role was officially listed as technical advisor, but Sarah understood she was there to represent the capabilities of Black Talon without revealing the unit's classified nature. The conference was being held at the Pentagon, in a secure briefing room where attendees included generals, admirals, civilian intelligence officials, and policymakers whose decisions affected global military operations. Sarah wore her dress uniform with the decorations she was authorized to display publicly, though her most significant achievements remained classified and unacknowledged. As she entered the briefing room, Sarah noticed the familiar dynamic she had encountered throughout her military career. She was the only female soldier present, and several attendees looked at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. The difference now was that she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from operational experience at the highest levels of military capability. Ladies and gentlemen, General Morrison announced to the assembled group, I'd like to introduce Staff Sergeant Chen, who will be providing technical insight on precision operations capabilities. Sarah took her assigned seat at the conference table, acutely aware that she was surrounded by officials whose ranks far exceeded her own but whose operational experience was largely theoretical compared to her recent missions. The briefing began with intelligence presentations about emerging threats in various global regions. Sarah listened carefully, recognizing several situations where Black Talon had already been tasked with gathering intelligence or conducting precision operations. The challenge we face, explained Admiral Richards, the conference's senior leader, is that conventional military responses are often inappropriate for the precision requirements of modern security challenges. Traditional special operations units have proven effective, added General Patterson from Army Special Operations Command, but some situations require capabilities that go beyond standard special forces applications. Sarah understood that the conversation was moving toward the reason for her presence at the briefing. Black Talon existed precisely to address situations that exceeded the capabilities of conventional special operations. Staff Sergeant Chen, Admiral Richard said, turning his attention to her, General Morrison suggests you have experience with the types of precision operations we're discussing. Yes, sir. I've been involved in situations where conventional approaches were not feasible due to political sensitivity, geographic challenges, or operational requirements that demanded specialized capabilities. Can you provide specific examples? Asked Dr. Williams, a civilian analyst whose background suggested intelligence community affiliation. Sarah glanced at General Morrison, who nodded slightly, indicating she could discuss certain aspects of her experience without revealing classified details. Sir, I've participated in operations requiring precision engagement at extended range in urban environments where collateral damage was unacceptable. I've conducted reconnaissance in denied areas where detection would have created diplomatic complications. And I've been part of teams that neutralized specific threats while maintaining complete operational security. The room fell silent as the attendees processed her words. Sarah realized that many of them had never spoken directly with someone who conducted the types of operations they planned and authorized from their positions in Washington. What type of training and equipment does such work require? General Patterson asked.
Sir, the training involves advanced marksmanship well beyond standard military requirements, specialized communications and navigation equipment, survival skills for operating independently in hostile environments, and tactical medicine for situations where immediate support is unavailable. Sarah paused, then added, but, perhaps most importantly, it requires psychological preparation for operating alone under extreme stress with no backup or extraction guarantees.
Admiral Richards leaned forward with obvious interest. How do you assess someone's suitability for such operations?
Sir, technical skills can be taught to anyone with basic aptitude and dedication.
The psychological characteristics are much harder to develop or predict.
Successful operators need the ability to remain calm under pressure, make critical decisions with incomplete information, and function effectively despite extended isolation from normal support systems. Dr. Williams consulted his notes before speaking. Staff Sergeant Chen, General Morrison mentioned that your background is somewhat unusual for someone in your current role.
Sarah understood the implication.
Her path from civilian to specialized operations had been unconventional compared to most Black Talon personnel who had come from existing special operations units.
Yes, sir.
I came directly from conventional infantry rather than previous special operations experience.
How did that transition work? Were there challenges? Sarah considered her response carefully.
The question touched on her experiences with skepticism and assumptions that had followed her throughout her military career. Sir, the technical transition was manageable because the training was comprehensive and progressive. The greater challenge was proving to instructors and teammates that my capabilities weren't limited by their initial assumptions about my background or appearance.
Can you elaborate on that? Admiral Richards asked.
Sarah realized this was a defining moment, not just for the conference but for her own understanding of how far she had traveled from that first day at the recruitment center. Sir, when I first enlisted, people saw a small female and assumed I couldn't handle infantry work.
When I excelled at infantry training, they assumed I couldn't handle special operations selection. When I succeeded in special operations training, they assumed I couldn't perform effectively in actual operations. Sarah's voice remained calm and professional.
Each assumption was proven wrong through performance, but the pattern continued.
And how did you handle that ongoing skepticism? Dr. Williams inquired.
Sir, I learned that other people's assumptions were less important than my own capabilities and determination. I focused on exceeding every standard placed before me rather than trying to convince anyone through words alone. General Morrison spoke for the first time since introducing her. Staff Sergeant Chen, perhaps you could share your perspective on how we identify and develop exceptional talent that might not fit conventional expectations.
Sarah understood that this question was central to the entire conference's purpose.
Black Talon and similar units needed personnel who could perform at levels that conventional selection processes might not recognize. Sir, I believe the military's greatest asset is personnel who bring unexpected capabilities to challenging situations.
Sometimes those capabilities exist in people who don't match traditional profiles for elite units. Sarah looked around the room at the assembled senior officials.
My experience suggests that aptitude, determination, and character are more important than physical appearance or conventional background.
Interesting perspective, Admiral Richards commented. How would you apply that to current recruitment and selection processes?
Sir, I would focus evaluation on demonstrated performance rather than assumptions based on demographics or previous experience. Someone's ability to excel under pressure and adapt to challenging situations can't be determined by looking at them or reviewing their background file. Dr. Williams made notes as she spoke.
Staff Sergeant Chen, your unit conducts operations that require exceptional discretion and independence. How do you prepare for that psychological isolation? The question touched on one of the most challenging aspects of Black Talon operations.
Team members often worked alone for extended periods, sometimes in hostile territory where capture or compromise would create international incidents. Sir, the psychological preparation involves accepting responsibility for outcomes that extend beyond personal survival or mission success. When your actions could affect national security or international relations, you develop a level of focus and commitment that overrides normal stress responses. That's a heavy burden for an individual operator, General Patterson observed.
Yes, sir. But it's also what makes the work meaningful. Knowing that your individual performance can contribute to protecting people who will never know you exist creates a sense of purpose that sustains you through difficult situations. Sarah realized as she spoke that her words were describing not just operational requirements, but her own evolution from the uncertain young woman who had walked into the recruitment center to the confident operator she had become.
Admiral Richards consulted his agenda before speaking again. Staff Sergeant Chen, we're considering expansion of precision operations capabilities. What would you recommend as priorities for such expansion?
Sir, I would prioritize 3 areas. First, advanced selection processes that identify psychological resilience and adaptability rather than just physical or technical qualifications. Second, comprehensive training that prepares operators for independent decision-making under extreme circumstances. Third, equipment and support systems that enable sustained operations in denied areas without external assistance.
Those recommendations sound expensive and time-intensive, Dr. Williams noted.
Sir, elite capabilities require elite investment. The alternative is continuing to face situations where our conventional responses are inadequate or politically unacceptable. General Morrison nodded approvingly at her response.
Staff Sergeant Chen, if you were designing a program to identify and develop the next generation of precision operators, what would it look like? Sarah considered the question, thinking about her own journey and the lessons learned from her Black Talon teammates.
Sir, I would start by looking beyond traditional candidate pools. Some of our most effective operators have come from unexpected backgrounds. I would focus on psychological evaluation that identifies people who perform better under pressure rather than worse. And I would structure training to gradually increase independence and decision-making authority, so operators learn to function effectively without constant supervision or support. That approach seems to have worked well in your case, Admiral Richards observed. Sir, my case demonstrates that exceptional performance can emerge from individuals who don't fit conventional expectations. The key is providing opportunity and proper development rather than making assumptions about potential based on appearance or background. The conference continued for several more hours, covering technical aspects of precision operations, equipment requirements, and strategic applications. Throughout the discussions, Sarah found herself serving as a bridge between the policymakers who authorized operations and the operational reality of conducting missions in hostile environments. As the conference concluded, Admiral Richards addressed her directly. Staff Sergeant Chen, your perspective has been invaluable today. It's clear that your experience represents the type of capability we need to develop more extensively.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored to contribute to these discussions.
General Morrison approached as the other attendees filed out of the briefing room.
Well done, Sergeant Chen. Your contributions today will influence policy decisions that affect special operations for years to come.
Sir, I hope my experience helps identify and develop other operators who might not fit traditional expectations.
I believe it will. Your journey from recruitment center to Black Talon demonstrates what's possible when we focus on capability rather than assumptions.
As Sarah left the Pentagon that evening, she reflected on how far she had traveled since that first day when the reception sergeant had questioned whether she was in the right building. The young woman who had asked for a rifle despite the mockery of others had become an operator whose expertise was sought by the nation's highest military leadership. The specialized rifle that had caused such controversy during training now resided in her secure equipment locker, along with advanced gear that represented the cutting edge of military technology. But, more importantly, Sarah had developed into someone who could be trusted with responsibilities that few soldiers ever imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her father, saw the news about the Pentagon conference.
Proud of you, sweetheart, whatever you're doing there.
Sarah smiled, knowing that her father would never understand the full scope of her military service due to its classified nature. But, his pride in her achievements meant everything, even though he could only see the public acknowledgement of her contributions. That night, as she prepared for her next operational assignment, Sarah thought about the young recruits who were probably going through infantry training at Fort Benning, facing the same skepticism and challenges she had encountered. Some of them would exceed expectations and find opportunities they had never imagined possible.
The black Talon unit patch on her equipment bag bore the image of a stylized raptor with wings spread in flight, surrounded by words that were visible only to those authorized to know of the unit's existence: precision through excellence. Below that official motto, previous unit members had added an unofficial inscription that better captured the spirit of their specialized service: impossible is where we start. Sarah had learned that motto applied not just to operational challenges, but to personal growth and the breaking of barriers that others considered insurmountable. The girl who had been mocked for requesting a rifle had become someone whose whispered call sign, Black Talon Mark, could change the course of international events. Her journey proved that determination, skill, and character could overcome any assumption or limitation that others tried to impose. In a world where most people were defined by other people's expectations, Sarah had defined herself through performance that spoke louder than any words. The next morning would bring a new mission, a new challenge, and new opportunities to prove that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected sources. Sarah Chen, Staff Sergeant, Black Talon Operator, had learned that the only limitations that truly mattered were the ones you accepted for yourself. The specialized rifle that had marked the beginning of her transformation now served as a tool for protecting national security at the highest levels of classified operations. And, somewhere in a recruitment center, another young person was probably facing skepticism for requesting an opportunity that others thought was beyond their reach. Sarah hoped that her example would make it easier for that person to prove that assumptions were just starting points, not destinations, and that the most important battles were often won by those who refused to accept other people's limitations as their own reality. The mockery had long since stopped. In its place was the quiet respect accorded to those who had proven themselves where it mattered most, under conditions that tested every aspect of human capability and character. Sarah Chen had answered every challenge with performance, and performance had given her a voice that commanded attention in the highest levels of military leadership. When people whispered Black Talon Mark now, it was with respect for capabilities that had been proven in the world's most demanding operational environments. The journey from skepticism to recognition had been long and difficult, but it had created an operator whose contributions extended far beyond her individual achievements to influence the future of precision military operations. Her story had become proof that excellence could emerge from anywhere, that determination could overcome any obstacle, and that the most important victories were often won by those who refused to accept limitations that others tried to impose. The young woman who had once been mocked for her ambitions had become someone whose expertise shaped national security policy and whose example opened doors for others who dared to exceed expectations.